Hi there, good evening, good morning, good day, wherever you are in the world. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat, where I am in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So let me know where you're from. Welcome, Joanne. I see somebody from the Netherlands, Oregon, from Cork. Well done, Skegness. Lovely to see you. So whether you're watching this live or watching recording, you are very, very welcome. And somebody from High River, Suffolk, Bordeaux, wonderful, Belgium. Let me see, Colorado, Kent, lovely to see you all. Linda Joan from Australia, well done on being up so early. Floriana, wonderful to see you, and from France and East Yorkshire. Anyway, welcome, and let me introduce you to tonight's mystery guest, and we are going to Cork. And I want to welcome Paul Corcoran. So you're very, very welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much, Eimear.
So I know you've just moved house. So what's it like moving to another part?
Moving to another part of, sorry, I missed that word.
Yeah.
Oh, Cork. Well, I wasn't in Cork before here. I was in Kerry.
You're right. I do know my geography. I apologise. I still always see you as wedded to Cork.
Well, I am wedded to Cork, and I've come home to Cork.
Okay.
But, it's been really interesting. It's only been a few weeks, and I think we're still, like, my husband and I are still recovering from the actual trauma of the moving and having all our stuff packed in boxes. So we're still living in a maze of boxes. Our success this week is that we managed to remove all the boxes out of the kitchen. So every surface in the kitchen now is covered with kitchen goods, but there are no boxes on the floor. So we're taking it slowly and saying every day is a win if we do one thing.
Well done. I know myself from it. I've moved several times, and it is one of the major stressful life events on the Holmes and Ray scale. So it's up there. So it takes its time and it takes its toll. But hopefully, this is your last move.
Well, we bought this house.
Okay.
This is my first time having a mortgage and being a homeowner, and it's very near family, so it's likely to be one of the last moves.
So you're committed and you're grown up. Well done. I mean, it's a sign of maturity to have a mortgage. Anyway, I remember, Paul, the very first time I met you was on top of the tour. And I think it was the Summer Gathering 2012. Am I right?
I'm not sure of the year. It was, I think, 2 years before the 50th.
Then it was 2012. Yeah.
3.
And because my first one was, my first Summer Gathering was 2011. I don't think I met you then. But, and you weren't living in Ireland at the time. You were driving.
I was of no fixed abode at the time. My partner and I at the time were traveling around Britain at the time. But I was mostly located in Scotland.
You had been in Scotland, yeah. But I remember envying you that freedom, because you were just in the car driving around, and you've been on a very interesting journey since.
I have. I'm hesitant. I know you for years now, so I'm hesitant about where you go with leading questions like that.
I just meant traveling and destinations and living. No, not attempting to entrap you at all.
I do trust you, I promise.
Okay, we won't go there. Well, it'll come up actually. I'm one of the questions I ask people is what brought them to Druidry. I mean, I know you come from Cork, rural background. I imagine Roman Catholic, similar kind of background to what I came from. And how did you find Druidry?
I'd been interested in modern paganism for several years. And I'll give you a time frame for that. So I joined OBOD when I was 21. So that's 21 years ago.
Okay.
And I became aware of the order through a book by Vivian Crowley, Phoenix from the Flame, and it had, or Phoenix from the Ashes, one of those two words. And it had a section on modern Druidry, and it had in the resources section contact details for OBOD. And I think I'd read that when I was 18, 19, and I said I was going to wait a couple of years because I wasn't quite ready to sign up for anything. So I waited until I was 21, and I'd finished uni, and I was living in Kinsale at the time. So it was by the coast and so on. And I signed up for OBOD at that stage. But my interest in, I suppose, alternative spiritualities and the whole modern pagan movement maybe started when I was about 14 or 15. Probably moved out of reading lots of fantasy books, enjoying that sense of magic and possibility, and then reading books on magic, which led to books on modern witchcraft and Druidry. Moved on from there.
And so while you were reading these as a teenager, were you still, going to church with your family and things like that, or were you rebelling or?
I was still going to church. I was an altar boy, and when I was 12 to 16, I suppose, I read from the altar.
Okay, yeah.
Now, the church that I went to, which is the nearest one to here now, is tiny, incredibly tiny. It was originally built as a dance hall for the local working community.
Okay.
So it has a tin roof.
Wow.
And some tin walls. And it was consecrated, I think, in the 30s, 40s. So it's a very small local community church. And I know that I didn't kind of officially stop going to Mass until I was maybe about 18, 19, kind of when I went to uni. But my reasoning for that wasn't so much I hate religion or I hate organized religion, more discomfort with the institutional church at the time. And also I needed to separate myself, to find myself, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I know you talk about revisiting churches, or you go to services sometimes, and you always manage to, it always impresses me about you always manage to find, not in every time, but some resonance for you with those rituals.
That took a long time to come back to. And I did a lot of reading and soul searching and so on. I think I was maybe around 30 when I started thinking that I was, no matter what someone's religion was, if it was their faith and practice, I would respect that. So why did I not have the same respect for people from my home community of their faith and practice? Just because it was the one that I was raised in. Mm-hmm. So that logically didn't make sense. So I then went and did a lot of reading like Tim Freak and people like that, about kind of reclaiming aspects of Christian myth and the magic within it. Mm-hmm. So then when I was able to revisit, it was like I was able to see aspects of it that were mine. And I could say, well, this is what I'm using for. So just in the same way that I really enjoy going to Quaker meetings, but I'm not a Quaker, I don't identify as Christian. So, but that doesn't mean that I can't enjoy the ceremony and take huge value from it.
What is it you get from the Quaker meetings that you go to?
Silence.
Yeah.
I love silence. I'm joyously introverted. I don't enjoy huge amounts of socializing, and it took me a long time also for that to be something that I embraced and I was almost proud of. But for a long time, it was, what's wrong with me? Why can't I handle all these social interactions? And once I realized actually it's just my makeup, now I'm like, actually, no, this is who I am. This is what I love. I love silence. I love one-on-one chats, but give me 1 or 2 a day and that's enough. And to then have a ceremonial, spiritual space that is completely devoid of words and yet still feels incredibly powerful, sitting in a group of people, listening to the divine in whatever way you view it or feel it or hear it. And also I think something around that is sitting in a space as well devoid of labels. Mm-hmm. If we don't have ways of talking about things, then we're just in a direct experience. That's what I enjoy.
Absolutely. And are you attending these online now?
I've only ever attended 10 to 20 meetings over the years. It's either been when I've been visiting Dublin and it happened to be on a Sunday morning that I could go to one there, or when I lived in Galway, I used to attend the meet in Galway when I wasn't working, which wasn't very often. I was usually working on a Sunday morning. And I recently reached out to the meeting in Cork to find out if they were having meetings online, and they are. So I'm going to attend my first one this Sunday.
You're going to? Oh, okay. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see how it translates to the physical, because when we look at even our own ceremonies, we had our first online winter one, and it worked really, really well. And I know I've been holding my own Grove ceremonies online, and I've been amazed at how well they've worked. I'm pleasantly surprised. A year ago, I'd have said no, inappropriate, not going to work, and yet it does. It'll be interesting to see how one in silence. So, I mean, when you think of the teas that Philip does, you know, it involves meditation. Some of it involves silence, not an hour of silence, but you can see how well the meditation has been able to work on online.
Yeah, this is something about the way those sorts of ceremonies work. So even when we go to yours, and I've been able to come to 4 or 5, something like that. I think they work so well as well because there's a group of people who already know each other and have that shared experience in ceremony that they can build. And I like the first few minutes of that joy of seeing someone you know. And I don't know how well it would work, or if it would work as well without that foundation of being physically present and having that physical memory of knowing what it is to stand in circle with each other and knowing what it is to chant together and eat together afterwards.
Yeah. Somebody's asked me to turn down the sound. I have done it a little bit. I hope that's okay. Somebody says, I wish I was sitting by a tree. Yeah. And somebody else, it also took me a long time to the accepting of my own family's religious beliefs. Anyway, so...
And that is actually the crux of that part of the conversation. So if you want someone to accept your way of doing things, why don't you just turn around and give them that same respect? If you can set aside, I know that there has been centuries of institutional abuse and so on with the institutions, but if it's someone's physical or someone's personal beliefs and their own religious practices, you know, give them that respect.
I agree, and I suppose I've my issue around Catholicism was not the faith. I mean, not for me, but I have no issue with it. Is the institutionalized the politics of the Vatican and all of that stuff, and the lack of accountability. That's what is always, and I've always felt, well, there's no place for somebody like me, a woman like me, in the Roman Church. So it was best to just to go. And I mean, I did it officially, but I still have great respect for people's faith, because when you look within the order, you know, the diversity we have within OBOD, from atheists to polytheists to animists, it doesn't matter. We don't get over, well, we shouldn't be fighting over it. There should be that acceptance, because it's what connects us is what's important to us, which is, of course, our love of nature. Which brings me on to your landscape. So obviously you're close to the landscape that you grew up in. So is there a difference between the landscape you connected with as a boy and the landscape you connect with, for example, as a Druid today?
Can you say what you mean by the landscape that I connect with as a Druid?
It's what landscape calls to you as a Druid. I mean, is it the one, is it one that you live in, or is it like a sacred site you go to, or is it the woods, or? Okay.
If I come about that then from the second part of the question, so what are the spaces that I visit that feel particularly special and sacred and magical and so on, would probably be spaces by the sea, which is not where I'm at the moment. Mm-hmm. Also hills and mountaintops, small streams, kind of little tucked away bits of the sides of fields, kind of like where I'm from. There's those little bits of wildness in between fields, or at the edges of places. So if I then go back to the start of your question, where I'm from is mostly agricultural land. And as you might know, there's like a lot of this area is called the Golden Vale. Like, it's quite deep soil. It's very rich in agricultural land in general. And so there are also very large fields and not a lot of wilderness. Like, we have, the large river that goes across North Cork, the Blackwater, that connects, North and East Cork. And most of the places that you would find woodland would be those in-between places, or small copse of trees here and there. What I find fascinating about this landscape, though, in particular, is how much recent history is kind of written in the land in terms of the layout of the land, or the way that particular houses have been built. You can recognize whether a house was like a 1900 laborer's cottage, or older big houses, or the areas that that there used to be a village there until the famine.
Okay.
And those sorts of stories of the place are very real to me, though, because I'm from here. So I know that family have been there for a long time. And across the road from their house used to be a school. And, there used to be a church over there because there's a graveyard beside it. All those sorts of bits and pieces. And it's that aspect of the landscape that I'm really excited with digging deeper into and getting to know more over the coming years.
So it's like a whole social history to the landscape.
Yeah, and that social history is something that I'm really interested in. Knowing, I think I said this to you as well once years ago, that it was only when I moved to Scotland and came home here on visits that I realized that I grew up in an area that was surrounded by manor houses and big walls. Because for me, they were invisible. They were just, an area with a big wall. And I knew that there was a house in there, but I didn't know who lived there, because they would likely grew up in a Protestant background and lived in a different community. And only when I went away and came back, I went, oh, that's interesting. How long has that been there? and like, so like I live in one of the oldest planted parts of Ireland, like, so as you do in Kilkenny. So like, we have a very deep history in our relationship with plantations from England. Like the Munster plantation was what.
And Kilkenny is Norman. So and Burke is is a Norman name. Yeah, it's so you're talking about planted history. Are there any sacred sites near you that you connect with?
Not hugely, and partly it's because I don't know them, because I haven't lived here for so long. So anytime that I've come here, it's been to visit family.
Okay.
So all of my experience here has been through that lens. And my connection with this part of the world as an independent adult hasn't happened as much as it could have done and will happen. Can you see me okay? Because I'm frozen on your screen.
I saw you frozen. You're gone now. So can you still talk?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
I don't know what happened. Your beautiful visage has disappeared. A blank screen, and there's a white. You're back.
For some reason, I shouldn't have been seen then.
Okay, so you're not syncing. Whatever you're saying is different. Try again talking.
It'll come back.
Yeah. Okay.
So, in terms of sacred sites, like that sense of, I have an interesting relationship with that aspect of Druidry as well. This sense of that, these are special places, but these aren't. Doesn't quite fit with me. So I usually see what people consider sacred sites as being evidence of early human inhabitation. So there was part of that same social history. And I don't have a huge distinction between prehistoric human habitation and ones that we have written records for.
That's an interesting one, because I think sometimes there's an assumption that the older the site, the more sacred it is. and that's just something holier, not
And
more
I
stable.
think a big part of that. Yeah, I think a big part of that is that the prehistoric means that we don't have stories about it. So it's a void that we can fill with our own sense of mystery and awe, and going, and we can go there and say, I wonder what this was for, and maybe we can find some alignment and some sense of purpose, and we can spend our time trying to wonder what the purpose of it is, and then we compare that with historical buildings, things that we know were constructed with a particular purpose, and we know what that was, and that feels like the mystery solved, and there's no mystery to look at. And that's probably one of the reasons why the word druid is so used. I was going to say useful, but I think it's one of the reasons why it takes off so much is because we don't have a sense of ownership of it, and we don't have historical details. It has that sense of mystery.
Just saying, connections with the land are so intimate with a specific place, and sites can change over time as well. And I think, would you like to speak to that? I think that's an interesting point that he's making.
There was a moment I had, I think, a few decades ago. I'm sure I've talked to you about this. When I had guilt about going home to where I'm from and not knowing more about it. That I should know the details of. So just to give a bit of background, the land that I grew up on our house is on a field that my grandfather inherited from his grandfather, and they were given that because they were labourers for the landed gentry in the nearest house. I don't know what the inheritance part of it was; it's a bit lost in time, but it's very much like this is our land, and it's only a 4-acre field, but it's. Most of my childhood was spent kind of either walking around or walking through that field to get to other places and streams and so on. And there's a stream at the top of it. And a lot of that one field itself has loads of stories, and not like major stories, but like things that, like my mother used to, when she was younger, her father used to dam up the stream at the top of the field so that the edge of it would flood and they could bring the cattle there to water.
Oh.
So even those little, like the edge of the field has its own story. And there was a point where I felt guilty that I didn't know more about this, or I was away and just visiting. And I had a sense when walking that field that didn't matter, because even if I didn't know the stories of that land, the land knew me.
I think that is really, really important. And I imagine that is the same for not just you who's coming back and doesn't remember the stories of your place, but for people coming to a new land, wherever that is, and not knowing the stories. Maybe the stories are known by some people, or maybe they're lost completely. And getting to that realization that the land knows you. And I think that's a very, very good starting point for any of us to connect with our landscape. For example, I'm not from Kilkenny, I'm from the Midlands, and I belong here. I don't own the land, it owns me. I would never have foreseen that I would be in Kilkenny. Galway was always the place where my heart and where I would cry just to be connected to the land. It's just, even now it's hitting me. But I don't want to live in Galway, I want to live in Kilkenny. And it's really interesting because I need trees. See, I love Galway, but it doesn't have enough trees for me.
Galway has no trees.
Galway has no trees. So
Yeah.
So I'm a tree person, and I know that's where I need to be. But to find that the land speaks to me, and the woods speak to me, and the trees speak to me, where I'm learning some of the stories. But it's that individual connection, that personal connection you have with your landscape, wherever that is. And I think that's for everybody, wherever they go around the world. And we're moving all the time. And the land knows you. That's somebody just commenting on that. And I think that's really, really important, because we move. We are migrants. We've always moved. And when you think of even the history of Irish people, we have our Laura Gabala, the Book of Invasions, where people have come and gone, and then people have come and stayed. People are always on the move, and it's really, really important that we're able to connect with the land and allow it to know us.
Mm.
I think it's through, there's somehow that intention to connect with the land that it allows the land to know you.
And there's something in that as well, I think, around being present at it slowly. And I'm a huge lover of like a daily walk, like a half an hour daily walk. It's a great way to transition from work to evening. And that daily walk from the front door to somewhere nearby and being able to see every aspect of the fields around your house or wherever you live in an urban area from different perspectives at different even just at that same time of the day. And it was actually one of my major takeaway from Penny's book, I'm terrible with names, The Path of Druidry.
Yes.
Where, like the basic practice of the book is at the beginning, at the outset, is not, you know, this particular meditation practice. It's to pick a time of the day and somewhere that you walk, and you're going to do that walk every day for a year, and you're going to notice the seasons, and you're going to notice what animals are there and what people are there and what's coming and going, because that physical act of walking takes you home.
I really experienced that during the first lockdown because the traffic is fairly bad where I am, and for the first time in 15 years, I could walk along the road, and it was just wonderful. It's so exciting to be able to do like a daily audit of whatever herbs were growing, and there was no dust from the traffic. Everything was clean and green. Looking at the pairs of birds, seeing goldfinches, seeing greenfinches, the bullfinches, the pairs of birds as they were beginning to nest. It was just, now I have birds in my garden, but to be able to walk along the road, and up to recently, I fell off my bike a few weeks ago, so I haven't been cycling. But when I was cycling, I live over a floodplain, and then we have these migratory water birds, and you can hear them. So we've whooper swans or curlews and widgeon, and it's just lovely to be able to take note of that. So I think that's an absolute, and it's a magical, and do you know what? It's a simple practice.
Mm-hmm. And we had a similar one, I think it was the second lockdown last year, when we started going for a daily walk to the main road and back, because where we lived before here was at the end of a boreen. For any non-Irish people, that means small road. And it was like to the road and back was like 2.5 kilometers. And just being able to notice what trees were present, but also starting to know who the neighbors were, not their names, but you know who was home at different times of the day, who their dogs were.
Yes.
And get to know their dogs' names, those sorts of little things. And over time, then we had, towards the last autumn, we had a family of ravens move across the road, which was bizarre that every time we left the house, there was between 6 and 10 ravens, either in the ash trees over the boreen or in the field beside us. A bird that I used to think was some magical bird that lived far away, because I grew up in a field that we never saw them. We were too far inland and too low.
I didn't grow up with them either, or if I did, I didn't recognize them. I didn't recognize their calls. And I have a pair of ravens now who moved in after Howard passed. And there have been times when I'd be in the kitchen, not so much now, and I'd hear them calling me. And it was like I was being called. And then I'd go out and I would see them. And then in the nearby woods where I walk, I hear them rowing, arguing at times. And Howard and I did a workshop or a weekend on bird language. It wasn't identifying what bird is saying that, it's what is the bird saying. And, you'll have contact calls where birds call out to each other. There's a call and there's a response. But there have been times I've heard ravens very close to each other. And it's like they're having an argument. And it's really fascinating, just to imagine what it is they're saying, And I mean, birds have a language, and I'm not being anthropomorphic in that, there's calls for food, there's warning calls, alarm calls from, there's a predator underneath, there's a predator overhead, and each of them are different. So they communicate really, really well. And it's just lovely to have a little window into what they might be saying.
Usually it's hide or my tree or food. Or
did you take my food? That could be the argument. That's my.
There's a cherry tree in front of our house here, and we brought our bird feeders that we had in Kerry and got some food from the pet shop. So we now have 6 feeders in the cherry outside our office windows. So we have a flurry of goldfinches, and we have some greenfinches there today, loads of chaffinches. There's even thrush and wren and so on. The rooks haven't tried to steal the feeders yet.
I know. We, when I first came, we didn't have any magpies. I would hear them, but they never came into the garden. Now they do. And it's really interesting because I know sometimes they can be like other corvids eating. I'm not disciplined enough to have bird feeders because you have to keep filling them. And well, my excuse was I was traveling a lot and away a lot. Now I'm here and I haven't been traveling and I still haven't done it. But this is my first winter that I don't have enough food, berries in the trees. I remember this time last year, even later on, February, still having hoberries on my hawthorns and fieldfares and redwings. These are migratory thrushes coming to feed, maybe stay for a week, and just having loads of food in the garden. But I didn't have many hoberries this year for some reason. So hopefully it's a sign that we don't need them, that it's going to be a mild enough spring for the birds, that they'll actually have enough food. So Patsy Preston says, well, I just put it up here. I love listening to the sound of the wildlife change throughout the day. I live near Rock Green, and it's wonderful to hear the swans in the evening. Absolutely, Patsy. It's purely magical. I mean, swans are such magical, otherworldly birds as well. Wonderful.
Or even rooks, which people have an awful bad name. And I used to live in Kinsale, and on the River Bandon, there's a spot that I used to go down and sit and do my meditations and things. And around an hour before sunset, the rooks would start coming home. And so there'd be hundreds of rooks flying overhead across the river towards the sunset from where I was. It was just the sound and even the smell of them as they flew over. It was wonderful.
I love that. Somebody says crows are gossipy. I mean, there's a lot of chatter as well. That's this connection calls. And somebody else says our birds are our snake alarms. Obviously not. You're not Irish and you're not living in Ireland. Yes. The dear old snakes. And then,
the magpies in our house in Kerry, because there was a magpie family that nested in the tree just outside our gate. So when I was from my work desk, because I work from home, I could see the magpies constantly. And so we were there for 3.5 years. So we saw them rear like 4 broods over that time. And, all the different things of we'd see the cats coming for them and having to make sure that any feeders that were out or food that had been left was far enough away. And one of the most traumatic days I ever had at work was, I told you about this, was a cat snuck up on one of the younger magpies, like almost adult size, and carried it off over a wall screaming while its parents were in front of me screaming, and I'm on a phone call with a customer.
Do something, Paul.
And then about last summer, I think, we were going for a walk and there was a dead magpie on just at the start of our lane. I don't know what the cause of death was. It could have been attacked by a predatory bird. And I had put it on the side so it wasn't, a car wouldn't, a tractor on our lane wouldn't have rolled over it. And it was still there a day later, so we took some tail feathers, but it still felt weird to be plucking feathers out of a bird that I has had a sense of connection with.
Well, it's somehow I've done that with asking permission. You say, okay, can I do this? And in some ways it's honoring their life. It's like, okay, even in death, you bring joy or you bring the sacred to my life or whatever I'm doing. I think that can be a nice way rather than leaving them on the, on the side of the road in a heap, letting them, not that they go back to the earth anyway, don't they? Yeah, there's a lot of...
You're breaking up a little bit for me, so I hope you can hear me.
I have a certified wildlife yard with 15 feeders.
15 feeders. Okay, the variety of birds seem...
And their social are nothing short of magical to watch every day. Wonderful. 15 bird feeders. Bless you. There's a dedicated bird person. That's wonderful. And somebody else is saying, Lately, it's been like a congress of birds in my local green. Kookaburras, lorikeets, pigeons, galas, and ibis all grazing and uprooting seeds side by side. Amazing. That's Ben from Australia. You mentioned kookaburra. So wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Great. My dog protects birds. Oh, Paul is gone. I don't know what has happened there. I'll just continue reading and hopefully he can come back. My dog protects birds from hunting cats. They like her presence. Even the hedgehogs do. Paul's coming back now. Welcome back, Paul. And somebody's mentioning woodpeckers. When I was growing up, there weren't any woodpeckers in Ireland, but they are now. And I remember hearing one in the woods nearby. I could hear this sound and I recorded it. And I remember sending it to Marcus, who was in a chat some weeks back. And he identified it as a woodpecker. And I always believed that I think they had become extinct, hundreds of years ago. But there's either they were introduced here, reintroduced, or they come back themselves. So here's
when I was growing up, we had no buzzards or anything when I was growing up.
Same here, and now we do.
And now now we do. It's wonderful.
This is somebody who when I was in kindergarten, I was scolded for watching crows rather than listening to the teacher. I strongly felt that she just didn't understand. Absolutely. It seems so unfair, doesn't it? Yes. Okay. So is Druidry something you are or something you do, Paul?
Something you do. I don't think that people that I know involved in modern Druidry are a different type of human. And I think it's also the sort of thing, I think I've been sharing some of these thoughts with you as well recently. It's the sort of thing is that we could still do the practices without the name and it would still be the same in many ways. Well, the best parts of it would still be the same. But also most of what we do isn't unique to us. Like can you hear me okay?
You had frozen. I can hear you now.
No. Good. Just for clarification there, we moved to an area with really bad internet and we had an aerial installed today to have the internet speed improved, but apparently it's not as good as it was earlier. It's a tough question in the sense that whilst I think it's something that you do, and I don't think that I could say to someone, you're not doing it, so you're not it. There's also an aspect of it which revolves around identity, and an identity gives us a sense of commonality, and we can have a sense of community through identity rather than necessarily shared practice, because practices can vary wildly. So I think that it's something that you are through association, as in this is an identity that I choose to own, and that allows me to connect with other people who share a similar identity. But I don't think that there is a particular, how shall I put this nicely? There's something around the way that we use the word druid that I think is both wonderful and problematic. And I'd like to lean into the wonderful side of it, that it gives us that chance to share into a sense of community and a sense of magic and wonder. And the problematic side of it is it can be very much an easy path down an ego trip of becoming a druid and being a druid in the world, which I have opinions on. But in getting back to your actual question though, if it's something that you are by association and it's something that you do, although what you do is going to be different to other people's what they do.
That's an interesting one, because I would say it's both. And the am bit is the being. It's almost like being as opposed to doing, but it's both. And that somehow my identity as a druid, or the being bit of it, doesn't depend on others. It's an internal thing. But it's interesting because I know
a relational being. Because without, like, what does that label serve without someone to say it to?
I think I can use it like my name is mine, and that's who I am, not who I do. Now, okay, I was given that name obviously by others, but I've internalized it and it's now my name. And if nobody ever called me that name again, it's still my name. It can never be taken from me. So there's something like that around the word druid for me, drí in Irish. There's a magic to it that resonates with me. That's very much internal and private rather than, hi, look what I am. I can't say I'm a big druid because I'm not big, but
you're quite a little druid.
Oh my greatness is on the inside. It's very hard to see and it's very subtle. But so I actually look at it, for me. It's about, for me, an am and a do. But I get your point there, which can be used. Okay, there's a question for you now from JJ. In which case, what does being a druid in the world mean for you, Paul?
Good question, JJ. Thank you very much. Wouldn't expect anything less from you. For me, I was having to think about this today. There's and it kind of comes back to.
Oh, sorry. Go on. That was a mistake.
I'm not wearing my glasses, so I can just see, like, there's a blurry line in front of me. So when I think then, okay, what does being a druid in the world mean to me today? It's mostly around having a sense of taking ownership of, or taking responsibility for myself and that I live in accordance with my values. And also for me, service is very important. So having some aspect of service to either the land around me or a wider community. And that's why I do things like organize the occasional online event, like the devotional that we're going through at the moment for Imulk, or, when you and I organize Aisha, that for me feels like an act of service to community.
Absolutely. There's a big quote here from, I read it out. Eckhart Tolle says, give up defining yourself to yourself and to others. You won't die. You'll come to life, and don't be concerned with how others define you. When they define you, they're limiting themselves, so that's their problem. Whenever you interact with people, don't be there primarily as a function or a role, but as the field of conscious presence. You can only lose something that you have, but you cannot lose something that you are. Oh, there's an interesting one, which comes back to the bit. I think we use the word druid because words and titles, I don't mean grand title, but they help us. We categorize things in order to make sense of our world. So I think the word druid helps us do that. Like OBOD is the order of bards, ovates, and druids. And we have those three categories. It's not a hierarchical thing, but they have different functions. And it helps us make sense of it. Otherwise, we'd be overwhelmed by the whole thing and the function of what roles do druids carry out. Even like we know, what do druids believe? We haven't a clue, because it's not that we haven't a clue, but we can't succinctly say what druids believe because it's so broad. But we have, I suppose, uniting them.
I was going to say, all that being said, Philip's book, What Do Druids Believe, is a genuinely really, really good book.
Absolutely. I always recommend it. It's about 110 pages, and he has managed to distill a huge amount of information from some worldwide library into this small little book. He has. That is so true. But that because we've such diversity within the order, we blend druidry, we have little pieces, or whatever calls to us, and we have that freedom to do that and still use the word druid if it resonates.
And what's fascinating about those blendings and people taking different aspects of things in. There's no clear line anywhere. You can't say this is the Druid bit and this isn't.
Exactly.
In some ways, the Druidry is the blending.
That's right. Ricky, hi Ricky. Good to see you here today. Hope you're well enough. Some words may have wider meanings or even be umbrella terms, but they give a very quick shorthand to point folk in the general direction. And I think that's
I'm all for labels.
Listen to this. This is from Zane. Paul helps in other ways of service as well. He taught me how to pronounce all of the words to the Druid's prayer in Irish. Now I'm learning the directions as well in Irish from Eimear's videos. Oh, top of the class, Zane. I'm very impressed. So thank you. Yeah. So it's coming. I suppose the next thing is you're talking about you being of service. This is something from Pat before I go on. Maybe Druidry isn't something we are or do. Maybe it's something we are always building together. And I like that because I think, Druidry is an evolving, organic worldview. You get people who say, well, we have to go back to this, to be a genuine Druid, you need to go back to the past and practice as our ancestors do, but we don't know how they did. But that taking from the teachings that we do have and our connection with landscape and making it relevant for a modern world, that yes, I think this is something beautiful that we can build together. And I think that's important. And this is somebody else, Gabrielle. I feel that being a part of a community, a tradition, and being supported by a tradition would have ancestors roll and huff and puff at not assuming that tradition and owning it. Well, that statement comes very, very, it's very apt at this time. Do you want to speak to that, Paul?
I'm just trying to unpack it. So I feel that being part of a community, a tradition, and being supported by a tradition would have ancestors roll and huff and puff at not assuming that tradition.
Oh, okay. So
I'm not sure I understand.
I wonder, is it that we should be assuming the tradition and owning it of our ancestors? However, we don't know very clearly how our ancestors, say, for example, practice Druidry. I mean, we can glean stuff, say, from the Irish language, and glean stuff from the stories, the mythologies, of the Irish monks. Also, the Roman writers look to the landscape for sacred sites and see how they were, with their alignments and things. We can imagine, but we can't know it for sure. And I suppose, how do you honor the ancestors now?
In my own practice?
Yeah.
Or what am I called to? In my own practice or in my own daily prayers and so on, I give thanks. I just give thanks to the ancestors of blood, spirit, and place, just for what has been and what I have in my life, and just ask for their blessings in my day. That's the simplicity of it. What I want. Another way that I look at that, though, as well, is wanting to know more and being interested in my ancestry. And so being interested in the ancestry of place, like, what was this land before and how was it used and where did its name come from, all those sorts of things. And wanting to know more about the stories of my people and where they've come from. So I'm particularly interested in history, and I have, maybe it's more of a historical sense of, I don't mean I know more knowledge, but I'm curious from a historical perspective when we talk about Druidry and the ancestors and what they believed. It was like, at what frozen point in time do we accept that this was the Druidry? Because they were humans just as we, and their beliefs shifted and changed over the course of their lives and their communities and the peoples that they were in relationship with. Would be unhappy with us saying, oh no, I am not. Again, I'm going to respond to that by saying, which ancestors? Because we all come from an enormous field of humanity, and the ones that might identify as a Druid would be only a very small subsection of that. So are we denying those of our ancestors who do not identify as Druids by choosing that label? So it's and like so that, and also if you think, forgetting about the width of, where's the camera, the width of our ancestry and all the people up here, we're also talking about the ones, you know, up here. Like, what about all the ones since? It's like, what about our ancestry over the last, you know, 1500 years? You know, do they not also deserve respect for their beliefs and their practices and their lived experiences?
I think it's a fair point. Ben, and with ancestors, they need to understand that we hold the mantle of life. As ancestors in waiting, we can't expect our descendants to be doing things our way. They need to find their own way, just like our ancestors support us in finding our way. I think there's a lot in that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I suppose I would ask you, how do you hold the responsibility of being a future ancestor?
That's a difficult one, and I'm not sure how far ahead I view. There was a book link that you shared, I think, on your Facebook feed a couple of months ago about being a good ancestor, and I got the sample of it, and I've read the first couple of chapters of that particular book, and that challenge of that particular author gave us of thinking, well, you know, how are we going to think in a broader scheme? So if your actions now, how would you think about how those actions played out over the next 100 years rather than the next 1 year or 2 years that we usually think in terms of our lives? So how then do we extend that even further and think, well, what am I doing for the people who are going to be here long after I'm dead? And I have to confess that I can also be quite... Oh, I can see you fine. Can you see me?
Yeah, I just missed a bit. You'd frozen and you start again. Okay. Yeah.
So if I think then about how do I live and how do I take that on board? Like, do I live my life to that extent? And I don't think I do yet. I don't feel fully in integrity with that value of living my life to serve people who are yet to be born. I think over the last couple of years, I've moved more towards that, and I've adjusted my lifestyle a little so that I'm maybe having a little bit of less of an negative impact on our environment. But I think it's something that I could do a lot more work on. And I think being in one place as well and having a sense of responsibility for that place, this land around us, and also more of a connection with the people that I have a sense of being my family. That will come. But at present, I am going to be honest and say not a lot. I'm still living at the moment, I'm living day to day thinking, well, what will I unpack tomorrow? I'm not thinking, how am I going to have an impact on, 10 years from now? Or how am I going to have a positive impact on 50 years from now? And particularly with the global situation, I'm thinking, well, what's today's death rate? Not what am I doing for the future?
I think right now, all we can do is live in the present moment. But if we can live as fully in the best possible way in this moment, I think that is one stepping stone towards the future. And I mean, this has been the greatest lesson for the world in patience, acceptance, and recognizing we are not in control. I mean, we get lots of conspiracy theories about how we're being controlled. We've never been in control. I think technology has given us some kind of illusion that we are, but we've never been able to control when our loved ones die, when they get sick, when we go. There's so many things that happen to us that we have never been able to control. What we can control is how we react to them and how we are in this moment. And I think this is a great lesson in doing this. And, this moment right now will be the future. Or it'll be the past, actually. But how I am is a step towards the future. So we can we can have some agency over our lives, but we need to be able to recognize that we do in a moment that we can.
How can I serve?
I think that's a very, very important one. So if I'm asking how I can be of service, then I'm less in how can I control my world or the world. It's what can I offer? What is it? To quote one interesting, who was a very popular US president here in Ireland, who spent, he and his wife, a lot of time on the walls in people's kitchens, on plates. John F. Kennedy, ask not what you can do, your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I think that's a very, very important one, is what can we do for the world rather than what can the world do for us. So I think that's a very, very important one. And yes, you have to be able to live while you're alive and not living in fear. Absolutely. So, and that is around living in this moment right now, what I can do. Actually, it helps to us not to go into that place of fear, because the fear is the unknown. And it's about to be able to accept that, living with uncertainty and living with the unknown, because in many ways that's part of the mystery. And Druidry is full of mystery. If we knew and could understand absolutely everything, and all of the meditations, all the experiences we have on this Druid path, if we were able to explain them all, then there's no mystery. And so it's that knowing and not knowing.
That was one of the things that okay, actually, it's a bit funny. One of the things that I particularly loved about completing the Druid grid was that I finished with a sense of knowing nothing.
Yeah.
Because if someone said, like, what did you do for the last 20 years of these courses? It's like, I don't know. I don't know anything. And I'm going through the Bardic grid again for the third time, and I still have a sense that I don't know. I have no. So if someone said, like, what do you believe in? I'm saying, like, I can tell you what my values are, but in terms of beliefs, I don't really have anything beyond them.
And what are the values that you hold?
So I just told you I could tell them. I probably can't. So family is a big one.
Sorry?
Family and community are two very big ones for me. They're two things that I hold very dear. And a sense of humility and service. And I don't know if you can hear me because you're not moving.
Oh yeah, yes. Can you hear me now? This
just about. Yeah, come back.
Okay, you mentioned family, community, humility, service.
Family, community, service, and humility.
And how humble are you? That's a really hard question.
You're going to have to ask me that again.
I said, how humble are you? You still haven't heard me.
You're back. Okay.
Oh my God, he's gone again. So maybe that's not a question I should have asked. It's actually it's set him off. I just look at what Kim Lockerbie. I've been thinking about what I wish my ancestors had done, and trying to fill that role for future generations. Like being a good steward of stories, collecting and preserving things. I actually like that because Paul's coming back now. Sorry, it was just Paul. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? I'll just wait until he comes. I set off the gremlins. Oh my God, I feel so bad. You're back, are you, Paul?
I'm back now. I don't know what's going on.
Mark Rhodes Taylor is holding me responsible for setting off gremlins. I'm innocent. Just Kim Lockerbie, before we go back to your humility question, I've been thinking of what I wish my ancestors had done, and trying to fill that role for future generations, like being a good steward of stories, collecting and preserving the things. I think that's. I mean, I'm interested in the stories. I think they're.
That's a nice way of putting yourselves in future generations' shoes, thinking, what would I want more from my ancestors? I like that. That's one to explore.
Yeah, and then do the same. And I like the stories, and also for me, preserving the language. You were talking about connecting with place. I'm always fascinated, particularly in Ireland, with Irish place names, and because they've been translated into English, at the end of the 19th century, I think we lost a lot of the spirit of place, because when you have an anglicized, phoneticized translation of an Irish place name, you miss the magic in the place. And I remember we had at a winter gathering, you might have been there a number of years ago in Glastonbury, where we had he was a speaker, a psychiatrist from Iceland, and he was talking about the spirits of place. And do you remember? Maybe you were. Can you hear me?
No, I wasn't there.
Okay,
I can hear you.
He said it's against the law to change the name of a place in Iceland, because you offend the spirit of place. And that's one of the sad bits for me. And then when I go north at the border into Northern Ireland, so many of the names are Irish sounding, but because it's written in a phoneticized, anglicized way, I don't understand what it is. And I find it so frustrating, because I know
a lot of those spellings in the north were tidied up as well.
Yeah, so we miss the meaning of places. So that's how things get lost. Where if we have that can really, really help us. So anyway, I want to get back to you said you value humility. I said, are you humble? You've gone again. I can't believe you are humble. I've stumped you. Okay, we'll move on. Yes. So, what concern do you have about the modern world?
What concern do I have?
Yeah. What concerns you about today, at these times?
You froze there for the important part of the question, but I think you asked me what concerns do I have in the world and how would I...
About the modern world, yeah.
One of my main ones is the intense polarization that happens online. I don't enjoy online interactions because there's no sense of, for me, and I know that we have friends in common who are particularly adept at it, but I find the lack of nuance quite difficult. And it feels to me like unless you're making a statement, there's nothing to say. So it becomes, rather than a flowing conversation, just a series of statements one after another. And those statements are kind of frozen in time, and then people attack each other's statements. And I don't find that useful or enjoyable. And I think because of lockdowns and so on, it also feels like this has become intensified, that it's the only interactions that we have. And that saddens me.
Mm-hmm. And likewise.
And perhaps it's because of my introverted nature. I find it's too noisy. There's too many voices. There's too many opinions.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has narrowed everybody's experience in their life. And it's almost like social media becomes, this is the only platform looking in front of a screen, that everything becomes amplified and magnified. And I think that's very, very difficult to deal with. And the polarity, I find it. And then sometimes when I'm listening to both, oh, you're gone again. So I think we may, I'll just give him one more chance to come back and see that if he can come back. This is such a pity, but and particularly since he just got his internet boosted. Paul, you're back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but picture's frozen. Oh, you're back again. I'm going to, it's either both of us or neither of us, because and I can bring this back to landscape as well. So the place that we live is in a bit of a dip. So that's why we had to get an aerial to get our internet a bit higher.
Okay. So that's you were talking about one of the concerns in this modern world. What gives you hope?
Is I do think that people are genuinely good, and that people are genuinely loving. It's genuinely circumstances or fear that brings out the worst in us. And and when we say the worst in us, we're talking about survival. Like we get put into survival mode when we become afraid, and that's generally what happens when we're consuming social media. That's where it's things, those fears are heightened and accentuated. So when we live out of fear, then we have to look after, number one, because that's survival comes first, and then so it's me and then the people that I love. And when we can have a sense of greater safety in the world, then we can look out for, our wider community, or the entire planet, or the entire biosphere. So I have a sense of hope that I think people are genuinely good. And then if you take someone and put them in a natural environment, they're also a genuinely good, connected person who cares about the natural environment. It's so movements that encourage people to be offline, and not necessarily because the internet's bad, the internet's a wonderful thing, but that encourage people to engage in offline dialogue or face-to-face, or this as a second opportunity, second best, give me hope. And a lot of things like the work that you do with your storytelling and so on, part of.
You're frozen again, Paul. This is so. Paul, can you speak? Okay, don't worry. Just can you? Okay, just speak, even if the picture is frozen. So you were talking about stories.
Yeah, the work that you do around storytelling, those sorts of. I'm not going to say cultural renaissance, but that cultural immersion of things that's happening with a different type of storytelling and a different type of creativity. And I think nicely in Ireland, we've kind of moved on a little bit from a sense of saving the past from extinction, which was a lot of what our cultural revival was about for 100 years. And it feels more like it's moving into a place of actual creativity for the future.
I like that. I like that. I'm just going to move on. What has been your greatest achievement? We're moving back to you now. What are you most proud of?
I can't narrow that down to one thing. There's
lucky you.
No, I don't mean in terms of I've done so many things, but if I think back, and I reflect quite often over all the different periods of my life and things that I've done and so on, I'm proud of having grown from it and learned from it, and I have a sense that I've integrated it in some way, but it doesn't feel like it's a trophy in my trophy room.
And that's not the purpose of my question. It's something around. Often it can be the smallest things that you say, I did this, without it being a trophy, or, you've become the CEO of, or the president, or whatever it is. But
I can't come up with a number one. I can say actually one of the highlights of the last couple of years has been our wedding. And it's not because, we got married. even though that's a wonderful thing, but the actual day that we created for our families, and especially seeing as the year that came after that, which was 2020, when there was no family makeups. So we managed to have a lovely day that was all about our families. And there have been deaths since. People who were there are no longer with us. So that day of memories that we created is something that I'm incredibly proud of.
Well, that was a beautiful day. Weekend, actually. What, do you have any regrets?
Lots. I'm not going to go into details, but my regrets would be times where I wasn't being honest with myself and other people.
Yeah. And that I understand. And I think that can be a really big challenge, is to be honest. Well, no, I think with ourselves and then with other people. I mean, I'm not going to ask you for the details, but I think it's
You can read that in the expose of everyone's data.
That's right. What is the most reckless thing you've done?
Reckless as in something I wouldn't recommend someone else to do?
No. Something that, I mean, I have a few reckless things. I haven't been asked the question, so I'm not going to answer it. But if I am ever asked, I will. That would have been considered reckless by other people, but they were the best thing I ever did. And there was a risk, but it worked out. Or I don't think I've done a reckless thing that I did. Like, I didn't jump off a cliff, and hope that there'd be a net there. But have you done things that were, in other people's eyes, reckless?
Yeah, like I've gone on extended periods of travel with no money.
Okay, that's reckless.
Yeah, it didn't seem reckless to me at the time, though, because I would have considered, well, I can just get money somehow. I can stop and start working in a restaurant, that sort of thing. So those sorts of pick up and go moments. Because
I wouldn't do that. So I've done other crazier things, I think, but I wouldn't do that because that's just too risky for me. But it's
like I did lots of couch surfing and staying in people's houses that I'd never been before.
That could be considered reckless, but it's almost like it strikes me as you trusting in the process of the trip, that whatever you need will come to you. When you're out of money, you have that ability, you have that agency to go and earn some money, trusting that you stay in a stranger's house and that you'll be fine and you connect with them. That's reckless in one way, but it also, I think recklessness requires, one person's recklessness is somebody else's trust. I ask the question because it's a complex question.
Isn't it? You like your complex, paradoxical questions.
Traveling to another country could be reckless. Taking up university on a course, going someplace for a job could be reckless, because when you're taking that step into the unknown, for some would say you're absolutely crazy, out of mind to do that, and for others go, no, this is part of the adventure. So
I've had lots of that sense of this is just part of the adventure. I'm going to trust that this is unfolding. And I do I do trust life.
Mm-hmm. Somebody says hiking in the wilderness alone, but not lately. I love walking in the dark in the woods, in the forest on my own, where I just hear nothing but the trees. And I'm not talking about the wind, I'm talking about hearing the trees. That to me is pure bliss. And others say to me, are you crazy? Do you know, there are murderers and there's all sorts of serial killers out there. And I'm going, that's not where they look for victims. I'm not even going there. I'm just not going there in my mind. Otherwise, I'd be living in fear. And it's just trusting that I'm okay. And I think that's a really, really important to trust. Although trusting isn't easy, almost like if I say to you, trust me, I'm a druid, or trust me, I'm a whatever, I have to earn that. And life somehow has to earn.
Yeah, you have to go through these experiences where you think, I've been through this and I know that parts of it will be scary and I know that I'll be okay. And being able to say, I know that I will be okay. Even if something terrible happens, I know that I'll be okay.
yeah, like what's the worst thing that can happen? Which is always a good question to ask. And you say, all right, now what would I do if that happened? Okay, I can manage that. I don't want it to happen, but I could still manage. Faith, self-confidence from Mark Rhodes Taylor. I think it's, yeah. I think they're part of it. And also, it's from Lisa Horn. Yes, and also bears and lions. Lions, from The Wizard of Oz. But I mean,
Oh my.
Oh my, I knew there was a little bit to it.
Lions,
I don't think
tigers, and bears. Oh my.
That's right. Yes, yes. So, what is the biggest challenge you've had that you've overcome?
The first one that comes to mind is probably growing up gay in rural Ireland in the 1990s, 80s and 90s. And the personal work that came with learning to celebrate that, and how much also of that coming out process into the world was about learning to trust the world, that that it's going to be okay. Yeah, that's probably the biggest one, because it's such a long process.
And do you think that? I mean, maybe it's both. It's maybe not a fair question, but when you think of attitudes to homosexuality in Ireland, and then your own attitudes and coming out and all of that, was it a combination of both, or what clinched it for you?
What clinched it for me to come out?
Or what helped you overcome that challenge of coming to terms with that?
Seeing it. So one of my, growing up, I didn't know any gay people. I hadn't seen any gay people. There was no gay people on television. There was just no gay people. And I think for me, it was moving out of home and being at uni, and knowing that there were other gay people at the university. Not knowing them, but knowing that they existed. And then for me, one of the actual clinches was a film that I went to see about a gay kid coming out. It was kind of a comedy, but just that okayness in that film. And that's why representation is so important. Just that I could see, okay, here's someone who is me on screen, and I could live through their story. And at the end of it, there was a whole coming out thing. And that it was okay. And that gave part of me permission for it to be okay.
Wonderful. Great. And I know you've often said being in OBOD has been a very safe place for you as a gay man. And it was you, I'm giving you the credit, but I'm sure there's others as well. You set up OBOD, or one of the founding mothers of OBOD. And I know we talked about the home and the family that we experience in OBOD.
Are you asking me to speak about the relationship then between that sense of home and family within a queer community?
Yeah, because you seem to have found that in OBOD as well. I mean, it's not just OBOD, but
and outside. And when we're talking about labels and the importance of labels at the beginning, I know that labels are just words that we use, but also gay is a big part of my identity, and it's something that I'm very glad is part of me, and I would never want to. It's something that's part of me that I would never want to go away. I love that I'm gay, and I also, because it connects me to this community of people who are part of my queer family, and a few of the names of people who messaged so far, people that I know through queer connections within OBOD. And it's an interesting conversation to have, because I've noticed that sometimes the people who don't self-identify as queer, or other words within the LGBTQIA++ community, find othering. So, why is there that community of people? Was it because if we don't have each other, then we don't see each other, and we become invisible. So if I didn't have my husband and I didn't have the internet, there are no other gay people in my world.
Okay.
And it's important not to be the last of your species, whatever that is. So it's important to see others like you so that you can it's not feel alone and not feel separated and distant. And I think being able to find joy and a sense of place within a queer community then allowed me to feel secure and safe within wider society. Mm-hmm. Because I know that, you know, not that people have my back, but I'm not alone. I'm not unusual. I'm not different. There's nothing particularly special about me. I don't need to make it. The more I invested in that sense of being part of a queer community, the less important it became in relationship with other people. And I think that's the same with any identity. The more you own it, the less it matters. But it's that paradox of you really have to invest in it for it to not matter.
That's right. It just reminds me of that we all need a secure base. And if we're lucky, we get it from our parents. So we have that secure base from which to explore the world. And that obviously when, as children, when we're like as toddlers moving away from either parent or caregiver, and we get frightened, we can run back. But then that gives us the courage to go back off again. And I think having a community, like you say, you have now, and you're living in a world where it's safe to have that then it becomes, because you have that secure base, then you can go and get to the rest of the world. Because I remember meeting you on the tour, and very quickly you told me you were a gay man. It was one of the first things you told me about yourself. Even, I think maybe even before that you came from Cork. So obviously it was very, very important to you.
No. I'm sure I mentioned Cork before gay.
No, no, I don't remember. Well, you may not have needed to tell me you were from Cork.
Probably just obvious. There's actually, but this is completely offside all the people watching. There's a GIF that I have to send, or an image I have to send on to you. It's a picture of the world according to Cork people. You've seen the map of Ireland according to Cork people, where it's just Cork and not Cork. But there's a map of the world according to Cork people, which is all really detailed parts of every part of the county and what you can do in each one of them. And then all of the other continents with these tiny little dots around it.
For our listeners, you may not realize Cork people are very, very modest. Paul mentioned humility being one of his values. Give us an example of Cork. Okay. So apart from being from Cork, what are you grateful for?
I am grateful for, this is interesting you asked that because I've actually but for the last month, I've been, as my part of my morning practice, I do a kind of 5 gratitudes and then one main thing I want to get done during the day. And so my gratitudes will vary from day to day, depending on how awake I am. So they vary between I'm grateful that I have a house, that I am awake and that I have heating, to I'm grateful for my marriage, I'm grateful for my family's health and well-being, I'm grateful for my friends and community, I'm grateful for living somewhere where I can see kestrels out my back window. There's so much to be grateful for that it's not possible to list like a short list of them. So but gratitude in abundance.
Wonderful, wonderful. What would you change about your life if you needed to, or is there anything you'd change about your life? I'm not talking about the past.
What my current life, I would create an extra hour in the day so that I could focus just on meditation and writing.
Okay. And perhaps that's doable?
Perhaps, but if we could have a 25-hour day with the same level of commitments that we have at the moment and nothing interfering with me for that 1 hour.
So I was going to ask you then, I suppose maybe it's part of this. Do you have a daily practice?
Yes, it's relatively simple. So my morning practice is a combination of some exercise, which is like some yoga type stuff, which is a particular practice that I've got with my brother, some joint rotations and some prayer. So I'll either just do something really simple, like give peace to the 4 directions, or even just taking breaths with land, sky, and sea.
Yeah.
I'll usually do some form of the opening of OBOD ceremony. And sometimes I do things like if I have extra time in the day, if I have a longer morning, I don't have work starting at 7, I'll do things like chant Awans to the 7 directions. I'll or say a little prayer to each of the seven directions, and addressing it and what I'm grateful for and what I wish for it and so on. I also do morning pages.
Oh, still well done.
No, I haven't done probably for most of a decade, but I started again this year. So on days where I'm working, I'm grateful that I'll do one page, and if I'm not working, then I'll do 3. Or this morning I got up early and I did 3.
Well done.
And then at the end of the day, I just have to take some time out and say thank you for different things that happened during the day. In terms then of other practices, like really simple things, the first time that I see the sun in the day, I'll literally say good morning and have a little nod and put my hand on my heart.
Wonderful, wonderful. You said you came to the end of the Druid grade and you realized you knew nothing, and then you're doing the Bardic grade for the 3rd time. Is there any teaching that you've done that's changed your life, or can you remember?
5 rhythms.
Okay.
So the 5 rhythms movement practice has undoubtedly changed who I am. And I engaged with it a lot in the last couple of years, apart from the odd dance around the house. But when I lived in Edinburgh, I used to go to 2 or 3 classes a week and umpteen workshops and week-long workshops and so on. And I'm quite a wordy person, even though I don't like... I love words and I love concept and I love theory. And the physical or the theory within 5 rhythms is very simple. So like being able then to be guided by a skilled teacher into a space that was very much embodied and emotional was for me incredibly healing, empowering, and so on. And being able to be in spaces where I could be very calm within myself and still dancing and also bawling my eyes out at the same time, and for that to be ecstatic and wonderful.
So what I was thinking of was a Druid teaching, or
was that the wrong answer?
And it wasn't the wrong answer. That is the teaching that has changed your life. So now I'm going to anything within your 3 grades, without giving any what do you call those things? Spoilers. What about Druidry has? Well, I suppose maybe it's like, how has Druidry supported you in your life, or what teaching has changed you? Maybe you could blend those 2 questions together.
In terms of teachings, that's really hard to narrow down as here's a line that we can say as a teaching. The experience within the OBOD grade was transformative. And yeah. And then I suppose the other part that's been massively supportive for me. So the experience of going through the courses, I often describe as being like a thread that connects, that has always been an anchor. So no matter where I was or what I was doing, there was always a sense that there was the course that I could go back to, and a sense of association. That when we talked about being part of the global queer community, but also having a sense of association with the order, has given me a huge sense of safety and connection and family. And that's probably the biggest takeaway. And then the next thing would be our basic ceremony, because I've taken that to so many different scenarios where I have a framework that I can share with people, and a wording that is open and inclusive to everyone. And so for even our wedding, like almost everybody, well, no, there was a lot of people. Almost everybody there I was related to would identify, and on both sides would identify very strongly as Roman Catholic, and they all loved your ceremony, like loved it, and it was incredibly Druidic, very pagan, lots of so that simple structure of having these are things that I know what I can do, and this is something that I can offer, and this is how I can be of service. So when I've lived in, for instance, when I lived in Galway, I had a circle of friends who were very much part of our local pagan community, and having our OBOD ceremonial structure that I could offer at the beginning and at the end of ceremonies as a way of holding that space was and is a huge gift.
It's so pleased. I mean, it's the same for me. And what I have found too, using that framework in other contexts, non-OBOD, non-Druidic contexts, how they connect with people. I've used them in Tanzania, for example, and how people have connected with it. Or, and I was like you, a lot of the ceremonies that I hold, that we say hand fastings and weddings, it's for people who are not Druids. So maybe the couple might be, or pagan, but from other traditions, and how it resonates with them. You know, it never ceases to surprise me, and really, it always pleases me that people can connect with that, and how universal it is, and how open and welcoming it is. And I think it's lovely to be able to say it's very hard to argue with that because there's no dogma in it. I mean, 3 breaths calling for peace, earth, sky, sea. How can you argue with that? And the Druid's prayer, it's very, very hard to argue against the values within the Druid's prayer. So I think it is beautiful. There's a question here, which is off topic. What's the plant behind the bowl?
It's a peace lily.
Thank you. That's just
Don't ask me what the other one is. But the peace lily was a gift from my husband to sit on my office desk. And it's behind me now to give a sense of perspective, because we live in a house we've just moved into. So I'm living in a bare room. I'm sitting in a bare room apart from that.
So is there anybody in your life that you admire?
Probably my sister. Well, she's one of the people that I admire.
Because?
I'm quite literal. I'm answering the questions I was asked. Because of hard work and, again, service to children and family, open-hearted and joyous.
That's lovely. She's not listening.
No, unlikely to. I don't know, maybe.
That's wonderful. Is there anybody, either in the broader world or in the past, a well-known figure that you would admire, or that has had an influence on you?
I'll give you a couple. So within the kind of Druidic world, the writings of Eimear were huge for me.
So what was it about hers? What was it that resonated with you?
It was she made her particularly, that book that had several titles was a Druid Priestess, or had another title. It was incredibly visceral. It explained teachings through experience, and that for me felt very alive and magical, and met a need that I had at the time of saying, okay, you don't need to be big or have X, Y, or Z abilities. It's very much around, okay, what's your relationship with and standing in front of a tree is a relationship. It still took me years to realize that you can talk to trees by literally talking to trees without because for a long time I was like, well, I'm not like psychically hearing anything. But talking is enough. Outside of the Druid world, the person who's probably influencing the most at the moment is Brené Brown.
Okay.
I listened to 2 of her podcasts. I've read all her books, and just her fierceness, her vulnerability, her mind, and the way she thinks these through. And also, I suppose what's fascinating me most about her, though, is that she's fascinated by other people. So the people that she has on her podcasts, every single one that comes on, I'm like, okay, I need to buy their book. I need to read everything they've ever done because this person is amazing. They are now my teacher. And Yeah, so they would be the two big ones who have been big influences in the last couple of years. There's loads. I can't actually limit who has. Like, you've been a massive influence on me.
I've no book.
You've no book yet, but you've been a massive influence in my life. The people like Philip, like I remember I was quite starstruck. Well, not starstruck, but I was like, oh my God, that's Philip Carcom the first couple of times that I met him. And I was still, even like, there's no one else in the room, there's just me and him talking. I was like, this is Philip Carcom. I'm having a conversation with Philip Carcom. Yeah.
And what was it about Philip?
Mostly it was through the Oracle cards. For me, was a huge thing. And also because it's his name at the start of every one of the words. And so his name was intimately associated with this sense of connection with something transcendent. And I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the course itself, is that it gives you a sense of connection with something bigger than yourself. And because the order isn't a religion and it isn't a school with a physical building and there's no home, it has a sense of the transcendent because it doesn't physically exist in the world. So it gives me a sense of being part of something bigger that I can't see. So it helps me feel like I'm, connected with the wider world.
And it's interesting because so many of the meditations, and we think, is around connecting with the all and with the nothing. And just when you say that, yes, there is no physical or order building or whatever, that and we have a global order, over 25,000 members all over the world and all of continents, and how we have that sense of connection. And now, because we're doing things like this with these fireside chats and also Tea with the Druid and now the online ceremonies that we're going to do for 2021, there's just a pure magic in it, that we've gone beyond physical limitations. And I suppose a lot of our spiritual path is about transcending and going beyond our physical limitations in our body and to be able to go out there and yet grounded in the earth.
And at the same time being intimately physical and present in one specific spot. And
I think it's very, very important. And it strikes me with Druidry, for example, when I was a bard and a reluctant bard because I believed I didn't have any bardic skills, and I wanted to jump to the OBOD because I was doing Reiki, I was doing herbalism, I was doing shamanic training, and all of the healing courses was get out of your head, go into your heart and feel with your hands and all that kind of stuff. And that's what they all do, and that's where it is. You're working from your heart. And what I love about it, in Druidry, is that you have got your 3 grades. So you start with your heart, and then you go up to the head, and you come back down again, and you bring them together. So it's that, transcending and being connected with everything, and with the all, and with nothing at the same time, that paradox, but being firmly grounded where we are. And I think that's just part of the magic and the mystery of Druidry that I love, that really still excites me. I've never been bored.
Yeah, I've always had a constant sense of, and I think that's part of why I have a sense of I know nothing, is because there's a sense of, okay, there's all this stuff. And if I wanted to, there's a billion and one things that I could, spend a lifetime exploring. And I've been exposed to knowing that those things exist, and therefore I can go and choose to sit in the middle, not touching any of them, or following a path.
I think it's absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. What's your favorite season, Paul?
Probably late spring, and that's probably for a stupid reason, like it's my birthday's in April, but it's probably but there is something about that sense of that time of the year, before Bealtaine, although in Ireland, May is still late spring.
Oh, it's the first of summer.
It's the first of summer, but it's still late spring. It's still potentially cold, and we still have frost in May. There's a sense of that heightened excitement in the world. That things are coming, the days are getting longer. And it's there's so much light, and yet we still haven't reached that point of, peak, for lunacy, really.
For me, I love all of them, but one I've just reminded me is that I love when the clocks go forward in March. Then we get an extra, you're talking about the extra day or the extra hour in the day. Hour. When we get that extra hour of light, I just, all the way I'm transported up a level of well-being that I absolutely love. And then I know we're getting, brighter and brighter and brighter. Even though it started already with the solstice, but it's less discernible. But once that changes, there's been a big jump.
My mother said there was a grand stretch in the evening last week.
Did she? I haven't noticed it yet. That's lovely. But so what's your, I always ask this question, what's your favorite ritual, in the Wheel of the Year?
The winter solstice.
What is it about the winter solstice?
I've celebrated the winter solstice in groups and with one or two people and on my own and outdoors and indoors and all sorts of things. And there's something about it that is universal in that it's a point, it taps into an emotion and an experience that touches everybody like that. And it also ends on a high note. Like, okay, we know that the days are getting longer when it ends, and there's something about the opposite time of the year, the summer solstice, where there's this bittersweet. Oh,
yes, it marks the decline.
Afterwards, yeah. So, and also, I really enjoy the sense of stillness that comes with it, the chance to actually just stop and to just dissolve into the earth and allow. Yeah, it has that. It also taps into what we were talking about earlier, that sense of trust. Okay, I know that the sun is gone, and I trust that it will return, and I trust that the days will get longer, and I trust that even though knowing like for the next 2 months probably that my sense of the amount of time that I have in a day is going to feel very constrained, because even now, like even though I get up early and I have a relatively responsibility-free life, there's a sense that once it gets dark, the day's over.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else I can do. So you may as well just go to bed. And I know that so that even though that's coming after the next couple of months after the winter solstice, I can trust that period, that fallow period to rest and enjoy the darkness is transitory. And it's not that I wish it away. Actually, I do like the darkness. I like the closed evenings, although by late February, I really, am wanting the light to come back.
Yeah, I too love the dark, and I love the darkness of the solstice and the darkness of winter. What I find is the transition in September used to be, it's less difficult now for me, but it used to be because I'm very active in light time and very active in the summer, but then marking, oh my God, we're going into the dark time of the year. Now, September is still fine, but I would find that transition, and once we'd passed the equinox, okay, I'm resigned to it. But once I'm in the dark, it's like I don't want to come out. And
and maybe I have a bit of a funny relationship as well with the summer, because I'm very sensitive to light, and I sleep very badly for most of June and July. So most of the summer months, even though there's loads of time, I just feel tired.
Oh, okay.
So there's a part of me that relishes the darkness, because it means that I can physically rest
and get more sleep. And I think this year, particularly because of the pandemic, is that we've been I feel myself, I've been given opportunity to stay in the dark and to rest and be with stillness and all of the restrictions that this lockdown is giving us, that I'm really actually in appreciating it as well. And I remember talking to a client during the second lockdown, and they were saying that they were finding it harder than the first one, because the days were getting darker and darker and darker. And now we're in the third lockdown, but the days are getting brighter and brighter and brighter. So it is very constraining, but knowing that we're coming out of it at some point, But for me, it's been an opportunity to actually live in balance with the landscape, which is slowing down rather than tearing around like a lunatic, which so often we have. We get winter courses, we get busy for the winter. There's Christmas, whether you celebrate it religiously or not, you can't avoid it in the modern world. It's a lot of hard work, where now it's like, just slow down, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah, at the last lockdown, I don't even know what number it was, lockdown 2.5, I think it was, we were calling it, because it was only a half lockdown. My husband and I took the opportunity to really slow down, and we started like a healthy eating course. We went plant-based for 4 months, and we will return to that. It's just at the moment we have a cheese sandwich is easier than trying to find all the cooking utensils. But I think I wrote about it online at the end of the year that it was the most earthy I'd ever been, because I was in the process of buying a house, and I was very focused on money and banking and mortgage, and not in a stressful way, but like, this is something very practical that I can have a handle on. And also, living very slowly, just going for walks and spending a lot of time cooking and eating vegetables.
Wonderful. Very earthy. Absolutely. Very grounding.
Yeah.
But
I'm very grateful for that.
Brilliant. It's lovely. And, I'm grateful that you were here today, and that we managed that whatever sorry to everybody it's not my fault, but there's my sense of responsibility. I have a heightened sense of responsibility. Sometimes I'm getting it less. The internet is not my fault. Initially, when I started doing Teas with the Druid, I would feel guilty that I was it wasn't working. So I'm losing that. It means I'm evolving somehow. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Paul. Really, really enjoyed it. And I want to thank you. Stay where you are. I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody. And what Paul and I can do, we'll go back and look at the comments, and respond to some of them. I think there were some questions that we weren't able to answer. And so I'm going to say goodbye to you, Paul, and just to everybody else. Thank you so much for being here this evening. And again, as always, your wonderful comments. I really, really appreciate them. So we will go and read them. And I look forward to seeing you next week, where I will have another member of the order to have a chat with. And blessings to you all. Banach Thí agus slán go fóill.